The words on the page are not mine, they never were. They flow from my fingertips, dark ink staining the paper like blood. But they are not my creations. They belong to something else, something ancient and hungry, something that lives within me. I can feel its presence even now, a cold whisper against my mind, guiding my hand as I write. It delights in the macabre, in the twisted and the horrifying. It feeds on fear, on the raw emotions that my stories evoke. And it will never let me go. It has been with me for as long as I can remember, a shadow lurking at the edge of my awareness. But it wasn't until I was a child that it first made its presence known, revealing itself in a way that would forever change my life. I was just a boy, no more than 8 years old, small for my age, and always a little quieter than the rest. I liked to sit by the window watching the world outside, daydreaming about things that didn't exist. My teacher said I had an overactive imagination, but I never thought much of it until that day. It was on an ordinary Tuesday when I first encountered the thing. The sky outside was grey and the air in the classroom felt heavy, as if something unseen pressed down on us all. It happened in school during a creative writing exercise. The teacher, Mrs. Henderson, handed out blank sheets of paper and told us to let our minds wander, to write whatever story we wanted. We were instructed to write a story, anything that came to mind. Some kids grumbled, others grinned, but I just stared at the page, waiting for inspiration to strike. Most of my classmates wrote about pets or family vacations, but not me. Their laughter and chatter faded into the background as I sat frozen, pencil hovering above the paper. As soon as I picked up my pencil, a cold dread washed over me. It was as if a shadow had crept into the room, settling over my shoulders and whispering in my ear. The world around me seemed to fade away, replaced by a chilling vision. The voices of my classmates became distant echoes, and the light in the room seemed to dim. In my mind's eye, I saw a dark figure, tall and gaunt, with eyes that burned like hot coals. Its presence was overwhelming, filling me with a terror I'd never known before. It stood over a young boy, its long, sharp fingers digging into the child's flesh. The boy's face was twisted in fear, his mouth open in a silent scream. I wrote feverishly, the words pouring out of me faster than I could think. My hand cramped, but I couldn't stop. It was as if the story was being forced out of me, line by line. I described the fear in the boy's eyes, the way his body trembled as the thing loomed closer. Every detail felt real, as if I was living it instead of just imagining it. I wrote about the coppery tang of blood in the air, the metallic scent mixing with the cold sweat on the boy's skin. My own hands shook as I scribbled, the lines on the page growing darker and more frantic. I could almost hear the chilling laughter of the creature as it claimed its victim, a sound that echoed in my mind long after I finished writing. It was a laughter that promised more nightmares to come. When the bell rang, I was jolted back to reality, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked down at my paper, half expecting to see blood instead of ink. The teacher, a kind woman named Mrs. Henderson, collected our stories. She smiled at me, but her eyes lingered on my trembling hands. The next day, she called me to her desk. I could feel every eye in the classroom on me as I walked up, my stomach twisting with anxiety. I could see the shock and unease in her eyes as she looked at me, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke. She seemed unsure, almost afraid, as if the story had unsettled her deeply. Where did you learn to write like that? Her question hung in the air, and I realized then that the thing I had awakened on the page was not just a story, it was something that had come from a place deep inside me, a place I didn't know existed until that moment. Mrs. Henderson's reaction terrified me. The way her eyes widened, the way her hands trembled as she backed away from me. It was as if she had seen something monstrous lurking just beneath my skin. I could feel her fear radiating through the room, thick and suffocating, and it made my own heart pound with dread. Her words confirmed what I had already begun to suspect. There was something different about me, something unsettling and wrong. I replayed the moment over and over in my mind, searching for an explanation, but all I found was a growing sense of alienation. I felt like a stranger in my own body, haunted by a power I didn't understand. From that day forward, I vowed to never write again. I locked away my journals, hid my pens, and tried to erase every trace of that part of myself. It was as if I believed that by denying it, I could make it disappear forever. I buried myself in my studies, focusing on logic and reason, anything to keep the darkness at bay. Science and mathematics became my refuge, their certainty a shield against the chaos I felt inside. I convinced myself that if I just worked hard enough, if I just kept my mind busy, I could outrun whatever haunted me. Years passed and the thing remained dormant. The seasons changed, friends came and went, and life moved forward in its quiet, relentless way. Sometimes, in the stillness of an empty room, I would sense a faint stirring, but I always managed to push it down, to pretend it wasn't there. I finished school, moved away from home, and tried to build a life for myself. I packed up my childhood memories, leaving behind the shadows that clung to the corners of my old room. In a new city, surrounded by strangers, I thought I could finally start over. I told myself that the childhood incident had been nothing more than an overactive imagination. I tried to rationalize it away, to convince myself that I was normal, that nothing was wrong, but the memory lingered, a faint echo in the back of my mind. But deep down, I knew the truth. It was still there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for its chance to resurface. No matter how much I tried to ignore it, I could feel it watching, patient and silent, biding its time. And resurface it did, at the most unexpected time. It crept up on me when I was most vulnerable, when my defenses were down and my heart was raw. My father had passed away after a long illness. The hospital room was filled with the heavy silence of grief, broken only by the soft murmurs of family members and the steady beeping of machines. I felt numb, as if I were floating outside my own body, unable to process the enormity of my loss. I was devastated, overwhelmed by grief and a profound sense of loss. The pain was sharp and unrelenting, a constant ache that made it hard to breathe. I withdrew from everyone, unable to share the depth of my sorrow. It was at his funeral, standing over his grave, that I felt it stir within me once more. The cold wind whipped around me, carrying with it the scent of earth and wilted flowers, and suddenly I was a child again, afraid and alone. The words came unbidden, whispering through my mind like a cold wind. They curled around my thoughts, insistent and impossible to ignore, as if something ancient and powerful had been awakened by my grief. They spoke of death and decay, of the fleeting nature of life and the inevitability of oblivion. Each word felt like a chill running down my spine, a reminder that nothing lasts forever, that everything eventually returns to dust. I tried to resist, to push the thoughts away, but it was no use. The harder I fought, the stronger they became, until it felt like I was drowning in a sea of darkness and despair. The thing was awake, and it was hungry. I realized then that I could never truly escape it. It was a part of me, as much as my grief, my memories, and my fears, and now it demanded to be heard. Demanded. That night, unable to sleep, I gave in. The silence of my room pressed in on me, heavy and suffocating, as if the darkness itself was waiting for me to surrender. My mind raced with memories and regrets, and I realized I could no longer resist the urge that had been building inside me for days. I sat down at my desk and began to write, the words flowing effortlessly from my pen. It was as if my hand moved on its own, guided by an unseen force. The lamplight flickered, casting long shadows across the page, but I barely noticed. The act of writing became a compulsion, a release, and I poured myself into every line. I wrote about my father, about his life and his death, about the overwhelming sense of loss that threatened to consume me. I described the ache that lingered in my chest, the emptiness that echoed through the halls of my childhood home. Each memory was vivid, raw, and painful, as if I were reliving every moment of grief all over again. But it wasn't my voice that filled the pages. The words that appeared were not entirely my own. There was something else, something darker, whispering through my thoughts and shaping my sentences. It was the thing, its words dripping with sorrow and despair, with a chilling beauty that both fascinated and repelled me. The prose was haunting, almost lyrical, and I felt both pride and terror at what I was creating. It was as if I had tapped into a well of emotion far deeper than my own. I showed the story to a friend, a publisher, more out of a desperate need to share the burden of those words than any hope of publication. My hands trembled as I handed over the pages, unsure if I was seeking validation or simply relief from the weight of what I had written. To my surprise, he was captivated. He read in silence, his eyes widening with every page, and when he finished, he looked at me with a mixture of awe and disbelief. He called it raw, powerful, unlike anything he'd ever read before. He said the story had a depth and intensity that was rare, that it spoke to something universal and deeply human. He insisted on publishing it, and to my further astonishment, it was a success. The book found its way into the hands of readers who saw themselves in its pages, who felt the pain and beauty of loss, as I had described it. Critics praised my darkly poetic prose and my unflinching exploration of the human condition. They called my work a revelation, a masterpiece of modern literature, and I was suddenly thrust into a world of acclaim and recognition. More stories followed, each one darker and more disturbing than the last. It was as if the thing inside me had found its voice, and it demanded to be heard again and again. I wrote feverishly, unable to stop, each tale more twisted and haunting than the one before. I became a literary sensation, my books topping bestseller lists around the world. Invitations to speak, to sign books, to attend glittering events poured in, and my name became synonymous with a new kind of literary darkness. But with each success, I felt a growing sense of unease. The applause and praise felt hollow, as if they belonged to someone else. I began to wonder if I was losing myself in the process, if the thing was slowly taking over. I was a puppet dancing to the tune of the thing that resided within me. The more I achieved, the less control I seemed to have. And I feared that one day there would be nothing left of me at all. Only the thing and its insatiable hunger for stories.